So welcome all the guests who are here. That's brilliant. The only ground rule we really have is the importance of respecting each other. And so people might need to move around, go to the back, turn their back to the rest of the group. Over the break, they might not want to talk to anyone. There's no rules about except to respect each other. And if I see any disrespect or anyone feeling unsafe, I will make sure that I help in that respect. Confidentiality, I don't need to tell this group of people the importance of confidentiality because I know you will be totally confidential. If, when we do questions, if you don't want to be on the presentation after, that's fine. Dream will edit it out. The usual format is a presentation, then a break, questions, and then if there's anything that Axia would like to update you with. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, most people are nodding. That's good, and thumbs up. So, Jess, can you hear me?
I'll shout really loudly from the southeast of England, and hopefully you can all hear me up there. Am I all right just cracking on? All right, brilliant. Hello, everyone. I'm Jess Hendrickx, and as Linda said, I'm one of the diagnosticians with Axia. I work remotely from a very little sort of town in the southeast of England, so a very, very long way away from you guys. So I'm hoping that everybody can hear me and can see the screen all right as well. So today I'm going to be talking about how you can live your best autistic life. And this will include having a little look at an infographic that I found that I use in a lot of training called the Spectrum Reimagined. I'll also cover what you need to do, should do, and want to do, and how that can impact your life as an autistic person. We'll also have a little chat about the sensory and environment and how you can do an audit on that to make life just a little bit more enjoyable. Masking and the impact that that can have on you. A bit about employment, a bit about support and therapy, and some final thoughts from me. And then, as Linda said, we'll have a break and then we'll go into some questions as well afterwards. It sounds like a bit of a weird mishmash of stuff, but I'm hoping that it will all link together really beautifully and you will understand how all of these things can have an impact on you as an autistic person and how you can make it a little bit nicer for you in your life. So, first bit, the reimagined spectrum. For many, many, many years, people thought that you were either that the spectrum was linear. And I'm starting off with this slide to reiterate that every autistic person is different. We do not fall neatly on a scale of less autistic to more autistic. Everyone's little bit of the chart of this circle is different. And therefore, me living my best autistic life as an autistic person will look very, very different to yours and yours to the person that you're sat next to as well. So what I'm going to be discussing today is not a definitive, you need to do these things and you will be happy and live in autistic bliss for the rest of your life, because everybody is different and that is so important to remember. However, I'm hoping that I will be able to give you some tools to be able to take away with you, to be able to do an audit on your life and make it better for you and the best that you can possibly have. Before I became a diagnostician, I was a mentor for a number of years, working one-to-one with autistic adults. And through that work, I helped a lot of people make really small, manageable changes in their lives to make sure that they were living the best that they possibly could. One of the things that I loved about mentoring is the practical side of stuff, that I'm very solutions based and I'm a very practical person and I really enjoyed helping people with that. Some of the things that I talk about today may seem really obvious. You may be sat there going, well, obviously, Jess, that's just stupid. We all do that. But don't underestimate the little things. They are just as important as the big ones. So, need to versus should do versus want to. I think that this is really important in our lives. The needs to. These are the things that they're the physiological stuff. They're the eating, hydration, sleep, having a roof over your head. These have been taken from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the very bottom bit. I'm not doing the top of it, the rest of it, but just to kind of give you an idea that these are the things you have to do to be able to survive as a human being. If you've got children, also parent them, you know, be a good parent for them, provide for them, love, support, and all of the other stuff that I've just mentioned. They're the things that we have to do on a daily basis to live. And there are ways to make those things easier, and we will be talking a bit about that. But I want to then move on to the should do's. These are the things that we put pressure on ourselves to do. And they will differ for everybody. I hear so much in assessments and mentoring, I should be sociable. I should be going out with friends. I should be doing this. But do you actually want to? And they're the things that you really need to be focusing on is the want tos. And they're all the things that bring us the amazing autistic joy in the world. So why is this important? The shoulds are the ones we force ourselves to do and are more likely to cause harm in the long term. We tend to have to mask very heavily. We may be putting ourselves into situations that make us feel really anxious. And obviously that can lead to shutdowns and burnouts later on. We put a huge amount of pressure on ourselves to conform to the neuronormative world, which I don't want us to do anymore. I want us to stop with the shoulds as much as possible and focus on the things that we have to do, the need tos and the want tos. So how can we make these changes? And it doesn't matter what area this is in. It could be social, it could be employment, it could be around planning and routines, it could be around your interests. But the key, I believe, is to start off small. If you take the idea of building a house, for example, you need a really strong foundation of the things that you can do and that you want to do. Don't take on too much at once. Think about all of these people that on the 31st of December, they go, I'm going to make some New Year's resolutions. I'm going to give up the fags. I'm going to give up the booze. I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to lose 5 stone. We all know by the 2nd or 3rd of January, they're doing all of those things, probably in a bigger excess than they ever did beforehand. Don't take on too much. You have to start small and you have to keep it manageable. And that's really, really important. So think about for yourself, what do you have to do in your life? Social aspects, the employment, planning and routines. What do you want to do in all of these things? Now, I'm not suggesting that you sack off everybody that you know, unless that is something that you want to do. If you want to have a social life, that's fantastic and that's perfect for you. But make sure that you're doing it in a manageable way, in a way that is good for you. And then think about the things that you feel you should do, but don't actually want to do. Now, obviously, I love my job and my boss is in the room, so I can't say that I don't want to ever work again. And we need to work, a lot of us, to be able to pay bills and to be able to do those things that we need to be able to survive. But are there things within employment that you can do to make that more manageable? And I will be going over some reasonable adjustments and some kind of support needs as well, or access to support a little bit later on. So when you think about your life, excuse me, think about all of these things and put them into the categories of need, should, and want. Give yourself permission to engage in those things that give you joy. Now that could be stimming, that could be stim dancing, for example. I learned about not that long ago that one of my clients absolutely loves just letting go in her house. It brings her so much joy and makes the things that she has to do just a little bit more enjoyable. And that's also the case with engaging in your interests as well. Dedicate as much time as you possibly can to your interests because they bring you the joy and they bring you some peace as well. So, sensory and environment. Dr. Luke Bearden, who I'm sure has spoken for Axia many, many times and is a bit of a god within the autism world. Don't let him hear me say that, please. That will go inflate his ego massively. Came up with this amazing equation. Autism plus environment equals outcome. If you can get your environment right for you, your outcome is going to be much more positive. On the flip side of that, if the environment doesn't suit you and your autistic needs, the outcome is less likely to be positive. So thinking about how we can do that, start with a sensory audit. I do have a template of a sensory audit on a Word document that if anybody would like, you can have it. It was something that I designed for my postgraduate certificate. I didn't end up using it, but it's just a very basic Word template. So if anybody would like that, please just let one of the Axia lot know, and I'd be more than happy to share that with you. So sorry, my voice is going today. So what is it? A sensory audit is about thinking about all of those sensory things in your environment. It could be sound, taste, touch, smells, sights, and interoception. So that ability to recognize the internal feelings and workings of your body. And think about how you can manage that the best way possible. Where? Everywhere. We are battered by sensory input everywhere we go. You may need to do a sensory audit for every different environment that you are in, as the senses do change. So home, work, outside, other people's houses. What things could you put in place to make life a little bit better for you? So just as a kind of overview, things that you should be considering when doing a sensory audit. Whether you're hypersensitive, needing less of something, or hyposensitive, needing more of each one of those senses. And these can also change depending on how you're feeling at that particular time. So some examples of this. Start with sound. I prefer loud sounds in some environments, which makes me hypersensitive, or you might prefer quieter sounds in other environments, which makes you hypersensitive. Prefer complete silence. I like loud sounds when I am in control of them. So thinking about that and thinking about those different environments, which one works for you? And then when you come to do the actual audit, you can think of the type of sound and properly break it down, i.e. background noise. Are you hyper or hypersensitive to that? The effect of the sound that has on you. So it could be really difficult to concentrate, distracting, might make you feel quite anxious. And think of a solution to that problem as well. Noise cancelling headphones, for example. Same with touch. You prefer light touch, heavy touch, weighted blankets. Don't like scratchy materials or labels in clothing. Don't like tight clothing. Prefer baggy. Prefer soft materials. And so an example of doing that audit for touch could be for touch, weighted blankets or a really tight embrace. That means that you're hyposensitive if that's something that you need in your daily life. You could use, the effects could be using a weighted blanket or someone giving me a really tight hug that you're in control of and that you've given them permission to do. It can make you feel quite calm, when feeling overwhelmed or anxious. The solution to that problem would then be having a personal weighted blanket or a weighted vest. And these are things that, you know, you can do at work as well as at home or at a friend's house. And then smells, you know, type of smell could be a really strong air freshener or a smell of perfume. You don't like it, it can bring you headaches, make you feel sick. You can taste them, which might put you off your food. Solution to that one might be to switch to fragrance-free products or ask people at work or home not to spray highly scented products as well. And obviously light is a big one for a lot of autistic people, not everybody, but a lot of them. Not liking having the big bright lights on, preferring natural lighting, you know, preferring sort of a warmer coloured light bulb, sort of yellowy instead of the bright white ones. And think about the solutions for those as well within maybe the workplace or again at home, switching off overhead lighting, only using lamps. I've got many lamps in my home, which are in my big ceiling lights that are only forever on. Now moving on to food. You've got a lot more control over foods than you do over other environmental senses, such as sound and light. So consider what brings you joy again. And I'm going to keep saying this because there's not enough joy in the world and we need more of it. So focusing on, you know, the textures of foods that you like. You know, it might be slimy, it might be crunchy, it might be soft. You might prefer cold foods or hot foods. Or for a lot of people, it's the unexpected textures as well. So having an item in food, for me, it's like undercooked onions in something like a bolognese. No, thank you. That it all should be soft. It all should be consistent. Can foods touch on your plate? Do they all have to be mushed up together? Using certain cutlery, mugs, glasses, crockery. All of these things can lessen the impact on you in your daily life. And then interception, so knowing when you're hungry, thirsty, or needing the toilet, for example. You could set alarms to be able to remember to remind yourself to eat at regular times so that you're not getting to the end of the day, you've not eaten nothing, and then you're shaking and got a banging headache. Always have a bottle of water near you. I've always got a glass of water or a drink on my table, so on my desk, so that I remember to drink. Another thing you could do is potentially have hourly check-ins with yourself as well, and consider whether or not you do need the toilet, a drink, or something to eat, just to kind of prompt, you know, how am I feeling? What's my body doing at the moment? Am I feeling shaky, dizzy? Do I have a headache? Is my throat dry? I personally believe that control is the most important thing to managing your sensory environment. As an example, I love loud music, but it has to be my music and it has to be at the right volume as well, and never on an odd number, ever. You can't control everything that's going on around you, but you can make small changes to change the environment, to manage the environment to best suit you and your needs. So moving on now to masking. I'm sure most of us in this room know what masking is, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And it is just adapting who you are to fit into any given environment. That could be using scripts, it could be mimicking people, copying their accents, their body language, their tone of voice, how they're sitting. Also their interests as well, you know, kind of focusing on what they're interested in and not saying what your needs are. And also not stating your own needs as well and just going, yeah, that's fine, I'm okay with that, I'm okay with that. Everybody masks, but the difference is massive. So for most neurodivergent people, masking takes a huge toll on their life because they are doing it day in, day out. in every different situation, apart from when they are in their safe space, which is very likely to be home. Neurotypical masking, I believe, is quite different. It tends to be much more situational, and it tends to be much shorter lived. So it could be going for a job interview, for example. Or if you're feeling a bit grumpy, you kind of slap the face on, yeah, I'm all right, and you crack on with the day. But you're not mechanically trying to have to work it all out all of the time and pretending to be somebody that maybe you're not. A client of mine once asked if I ever felt more autistic and like I just couldn't mask anymore. And I do, and so do a lot of people. You're not actually becoming more autistic, the mask is just slipping. And that could be due to an accumulation of previous events, both big ones and little ones, that has got you to your absolute maximum capacity and you can no longer mask. It can lead to brain fog, masking all the time, an inability to speak, to listen, to concentrate on things. You might become more clumsy. And this can last for days, weeks, months, or years, i.e., burnout. Not having control over your environment leads to masking, can lead to burnout. And as we all know, masking is exhausting. The technical, I think I read on the National Autistic Society website once that burnout is 3 or more months of not being able to do the things that you could do previously. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think that you can have mini burnouts that may last a day or two or a couple of weeks, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be as prolonged as 3 months or more. I'm hoping that some of the things that we're kind of talking about today will lead you to mask less and be able to be who you are, which will then lead you to living your best autistic life possible. So I'm going to move on to employment now and how this kind of fits into living your best autistic life. For many of us, we spend a lot of time at work, and employment can have a massive impact on us. Mainly because we don't have as much say over our environment or our workload or what we're kind of doing on a day-to-day basis. However, as autistic people, you are covered by the Equalities Act 2010, and you can ask for reasonable adjustments to make your work life better for you. These are not favours that your employer, goes, all right, I'll do that for you. It is law. There are things that are unreasonable within the workplace. You cannot ask for a bed in the corner of the room to have a nap on whenever you want. And it has to make business sense as well. So if you work for a small organisation, for example, there will be things that are not cost effective for the business, but they would have to argue that point very, very well of why it was unreasonable and why it would be detrimental to the business. Before you can ask for reasonable adjustments, you do have to disclose that you are autistic. It is important to remember, though, that legally, if you don't want reasonable adjustments, you don't have to tell anybody that you're autistic at any point until it becomes a point in which you need to now because work has got too much for you, for example. Some advantages of disclosing on the application form, if you are looking for a new job, is that you can ask for reasonable adjustments up front, such as interview questions in advance, a remote interview, more details, parking space reserved for you for that day, and some allowances. And the interviewer needs to make allowances for those differences. Reasonable adjustments don't just happen when you are in employment. They can happen before as well. There are obviously some disadvantages to this. You may have an interviewer who has an incredibly archaic idea of autism. And even though it is illegal to do so, you might not get an interview or a job because of being autistic. And it pains me to say that. But if they do this, it is illegal. But unless they outrightly say, I am not employing you because you are autistic, it is incredibly difficult to prove. So disclosing once you are employed. I got this quote from a website called I Am Autism, which I think is a Manchester-based charity. And it says an employer may ask for proof of the disability, but if the individual cannot provide it and the employer requires it, then it would be the responsibility of the employer to pay for any diagnostic assessment to be carried out, since they are the ones requiring the evidence to be produced. Clearly, therefore, taking a supportive approach and focusing on needs rather than the label has definitive cost-saving benefits for employers. I found this because I was trying to find out whether or not you legally had to prove that you were autistic. And I take away from this that you don't. There may be somebody, one of the Axia guys in the room, that maybe knows a little bit more than me about this, and I'd be really interested to hear if they do. Telling somebody that you're autistic seems to be legally enough if you don't have a piece of paper to state that. So, as I've said, reasonable adjustments, these are things that your employer has to do by law to make the workplace accessible for anyone who is autistic or has a disability. Autism is covered under the Equalities Act 2010. But you do need to have disclosed before you can ask for reasonable adjustments. You cannot expect your manager or employer to just know that you are autistic. Reasonable adjustments are personal to each person. So how do you go about doing this? You could do it in writing or request a meeting. Whether you are doing it verbally or in writing, always be prepared. Think about things, do your research, come up with some reasonable adjustments that you think may work for you. Think about what might have been worked in the past as well. Request it in writing. Even if you've had the meeting in person, my advice is always follow everything up in writing with your employer so that there is a paper trail that you have had this meeting. This was what you thought the outcome of it was, so that if you did have to go down any legal routes of saying, you know, my employer's discriminated against me, you've actually got proof of all of these things. Reasonable adjustments that you can ask for the application process. As I said, questions in advance, holding a job interview in a room that's accessible for somebody that has got sensory needs, information on who will be interviewing you, and a breakdown of exactly what will happen and when. You're employed, making changes in the workplace, changing the lighting above your desk, for example. No hot desking, having your own fixed place within a workspace, providing a reserved car parking space on a daily basis. There are also things that you can have with changing your working arrangements as well. So working patterns, flexible working, working from home or hybrid, reasonable adjustments for absence as well, you know, including time off for medical appointments. You could think about finding different ways to do something, sort of distributing work differently within a team, giving somebody different responsibilities or offering another suitable role, giving someone more time to do written or reading tests that are part of an interview, or your job in total, you know, on a daily basis. Or finding different ways to be able to be trained on things as well. If you're a very visual learner, maybe videos would be helpful, or being shown how to do something and actually doing it sort of on a hands-on way. Also providing equipment, services and additional support as well. And access to work funding is amazing for this. There is a massive waiting list at the moment, so be prepared. If you do want to apply for access to work funding, I'd do it sooner rather than later. Access to work is available for everybody, regardless of your salary or what level job you are in, as long as you are in work, and it's provided by the government. There are many, many things that they will cover. This could include training for employers and colleagues. It could be a mentor, a specialist support mentor that can help you come up with strategies to be able to manage and work better. It could be assistive equipment as well, chairs, laptops, screens, all sorts of different things, software, training on that software. And all of these things can lead into you being able to enjoy your employment in a much more healthy way. Getting help through therapy or support, such as the amazing Axia Post-Diagnostic Support Group, is not weakness at all. In fact, it's strength, that you have realized that maybe you can't manage this completely by yourself and you need some input from some other people. It's really important to find the right type of support for you. And this could be groups like the one that you're at today. It could be one-to-one. It could be mentoring, which is focused much more on the practical side of things, or therapy, which is more about emotional support, maybe dealing with anxiety or past traumas and things like that. There is a website, which is the Association of Neurodivergent Therapists. This is a database of obviously not all of, but some of the neurodivergent therapists in the UK. Obviously, post-COVID, a lot of people are working remotely now. So you could have a therapist, if you are happy to do it online, who lives hundreds of miles away from you. You might be able to find somebody that has the same neurotype as you. They may be autistic and ADHD, or autistic and dyspraxic, or just autistic, or just ADHD. It needs to be somebody who understands autism. And I personally believe that peer support can be the best type of support. That's not to say that everybody who is not autistic does not really get autism, because there's some amazing people out there who do. But having somebody who has had that life experience, that lived experience, may be quite beneficial to you. There's also another organisation that I just popped into my head about 10 minutes before I joined this call, and that's the NDSA, the Neurodivergent Self-Advocacy. They provide mentoring from trained autistic mentors. I don't know what their fees and stuff are like, but it's worth having a little look online. And also, I think there's Autism Forward, who do have grants for people to be able to have mentoring with their approved mentors as well. So just some little ideas there of who you can maybe contact. Also peer support groups as well, obviously the Axia Post-Diagnostic Support Group. There are also ones on things like Eventbrite and Meetup as well. Might take a little bit of trial and error. Not everybody's going to be for you, and that's okay. But if you do want to meet other like-minded autistic people, then maybe a local autistic walking group in your area that may be interesting to kind of join and meet up with some people that way. There's also the amazing Steph Jones, who is also another fellow Axia diagnostician. She has recently released a book called The Autistic Guide for Surviving Therapy, which gives you a whole heap of information on the best services for you and how to find. So I'm going to stop rambling in a second, but I just want to give you some kind of final thoughts to hopefully sum all of this up. Now, obviously, I haven't covered every single area of life. I'd be here for days on end if I had done. What I'm hoping is that this will give you a little bit of an idea of how you can start making those small, manageable tweaks in your life to be able to move forward and live the best autistic life possible. Get creative with them. It doesn't matter if it's wacky, and as long as it's not harming you or somebody else, give it a go. See what works for you. See if wearing sunglasses and your noise cancelling headphones in Lidl just makes your weekly food shop a little bit more enjoyable. It certainly does for me. Not everything will work, and that's okay. This is all about trial and error and trying things out and seeing what works and what doesn't. Please don't think that I am sat here living in autistic bliss and getting it right all of the time. I'm only human after all. But we are, as humans, a work in progress. And if we listen and learn to each other, learn from each other, then I believe that other autistic people are our greatest resource. As they have had different experiences, they may have tried different things that we haven't thought about yet and that you might like to give a go. And I really hope that you'll be able to take some things away from this to start living your best autistic life ever. Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't know if you can see Joe here is struggling to get this speaker thing working. Are you going to give up the ghost, Joe? Yeah. Okay, I'll try and do justice to that. So I think, Jess, we're almost going back to the very first slide. And given most of the people in this room, I don't know everyone here, most of the people in this room may struggle with executive functioning. And so decision making is part of executive functioning. So it's almost right back to your first slide. Should, need, should, want. It's almost right back there to even be able to discern which of those, is this a should, is this a need, is it a want? So it's almost like right back to the very beginning. How do I even know what I need? Does that give some sort of, yeah, okay, phew. So, Jess, over to you.
The way that I kind of broke it down was that the needs are the kind of the daily stuff. It's the stuff that you need to do to survive. So food, drink, shelter over your head, and then going into the wants and the shoulds, if we're talking about something like socializing, for example, think about the impact that it's going to have on you, and that if you want to do that thing, can you do it in a way that it's going to lessen the impact? Does that kind of make sense?
Okay, so something about lessening impact. Do you think as well, Jess, this could be where actually having somebody else who you trust, that you could actually ask them, what do I want? Because I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's almost like, actually, do I even know what I want? And am I so caught up in I should do this that I've not even allowed myself to think about what I want? And I suppose that might be what, when you were talking about mentors, or, you know, if somebody's involved in a therapeutic relationship, they could ask the therapist, but they could ask the mentor, or maybe in situations like the group we're in now, that, you know, we could almost ask each other to help us say, and maybe if there aren't huge numbers of questions, and maybe a bit later in the group, there might be someone in the room who you could trust to say, can you help me think of something that I really want, because I actually can't do this on my own. maybe we could, if we've got time, we could do that. Or when you get home, if there's someone you trust. Yeah, I think with the Maslow's hierarchy, I think it's well recognised, isn't it? If you're starving, you can't really start to be thinking about anything much above that. And I'm not saying that autistic people are starving, but if you don't know when you're hungry and you haven't got that need met.
If you're saying if you're hungry, you can't really be worrying too much about what the toppings on the pizza are.
Exactly, Cal. You can't be worried about the toppings on the pizza. It would just be anything. Yes, yeah. That's an interesting way I think about Maslow's hierarchy as the pizza base with the toppings.
You gave me a pizza oven. I'm going to do pizza analogies. We've discussed this.
We did discuss this. Okay. So, other questions?
I think also just leading on from what Linda said there is that if you can come up with a pros and cons list as well, and if the cons of the thing that you feel like you should be doing are really, really long compared to the pros, might not be worth it.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of actually, instead of letting all this stuff go round and round in your head, which in itself can lead to burnout, that the more you can get out, say like either with a drawing or a piece of music or a list or the more you can get it out there, it becomes more objective. And also that word you used about control, Jess, that actually you're in control because you've put it out there on a piece of paper. And, you know, if I go to this event, these are the good things that are going to, this is the joy it's going to bring me. And this is the distress it's going to bring me. And if there's no joy, then I think you just immediately cross that off by going, nah, that's a should. I'm not going to do that. Katrina. Okay, so it's Claire Evans Williams, hyphenated Evans Williams. Yeah. Altscape, that's AUTSCAPE. Yeah. That this is an autistic clinical psychologist who has looked at Maslow's hierarchy in the context of being autistic. So, Dream, can we see if we can find that and put that on the website for everybody, please? Thank you, Katrina. That's very helpful.
Google search.
Quick Google search, yeah. Everyone's Googling. Is this something you want to do or need to do or feel you should do? We've got Steph's book is actually here as well, if people want to borrow that. And Helen, you did a review on the website of Steph's book.
Little one. It's absolutely fantastic. Recommend it.
So that's Helen is really, really recommending Steph's book, as do I. So, yeah, we've got a copy here if people want to borrow it.
I think we should say for legal reasons, hashtag not an ad.
Yeah, hashtag I get no commission from it whatsoever, yeah. I think she gets something like 50p a book. It's absolutely nothing. You don't make money from books. Okay, so Jess, advice about someone who's been doing a job for 8 years. The way they've managed that has been an enormous cost to themselves, including burnout, including masking. And how after 8 years do you go to your employer and say, I need reasonable adjustments? The fear that comes with that is a fear of not being believed. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but almost like a fear of shame. A fear of shame. And so I think when you were talking about the reasonable adjustments, it's easier if it's at the beginning. But I can see, if you've been doing a job for a long time and no one's noticed anything, you then come and say, oh, by the way, I need reasonable adjustments, that the employer may well ask some questions and you may not want to disclose that. So, Jess, any advice on that, please?
I think what's really important to remember is that things change, and that you don't necessarily need to go into the kind of really personal stuff, but you can say that, you know, the accumulation of working here for 8 years has meant that I am now really struggling with this. And, you know, that also people's needs change. It's not static. that they go through periods of when you may need more support or less support at work. If there is somebody within your team that you are close to or that you feel kind of safe with, maybe bringing them in on the conversation as well, so that you've kind of got a bit of a backup. And some people sort of, I know I've talked a lot about audits, but also maybe doing a kind of, you could, if you wanted to, do a kind of profile on yourself as an autistic person of what your strengths are, but also what the environmental challenges are as well. Obviously, I'm not blaming you as the autistic person, I'm blaming the workplace here, very much so. But yeah, thinking about, how you can approach that. And I do know that it is harder after time. Just a question, does your employer know that you're autistic?
Okay, so Jess, the response was yes, the employer does know, but they're in a working environment where line management and sort of organisational structure is somewhat unusual.
You could ask for access to work funding and ask for a workplace assessment to be done, which would then show you what support you needed within the workplace. That may be one way to go around it without actually getting really sort of personal about it. But also, I just want to reiterate that there is no shame in your needs changing as well, that isn't a bad thing. It happens and that's okay. And the reason why it's got to this point is because you've not had the support for so long. And that's not your fault or your responsibility. That's your employer's.
Yeah. Okay, so Jess, again, it's when do you tell, when don't you tell? So it may be you don't want to say at the interview stage, but then if you were successful in the job application, you then would say, oh, by the way, I'm autistic. I didn't tell you before. So yeah, this is another difficult one, isn't it? Jess, advice on this one, please.
You are legally, you don't have to tell them, or you can tell them whenever you want. So you could have been there for 5 years and then go, oh, by the way, I'm autistic and I need some reasonable adjustments. The law is on your side with this one. And that's really important to remember, is that, you disclose when you feel comfortable to do so. They cannot discriminate against you. If you, for example, worst case scenario, you told them that you were autistic after you'd been given the job and then they rescinded that job offer, you'd have a bloody good case in the employment tribunal. Obviously, we don't want to go down that route, and I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume that the law would be very, very heavily on your side with that one, and they'd find it very difficult to go, oh, hang on a minute. No, we didn't say this person can't have the job because they're autistic. It's just pure coincidence. So a lot of people don't disclose until after the interview process because of that kind of, bias that a lot of people have still. And like I said, that archaic view on autism. But legally, you do what you need to do. That is completely up to you.
Jess, would you recommend that? So one of the things I know that Calvin's a strong advocate for is that people actually joining trades unions. I don't know what, and we've also got ACAS, which is the arbitrary, or whatever it stands for, conciliatory advisory service. Google it, everyone, ACAS. So it's almost like getting that external, like you mentioned, access to work. So I found access to work very, very helpful when I was working in the Sheffield Asperger Syndrome service, so you can tell how long ago that was. That because of my dyspraxia, organisation is incredibly difficult for me, and the access to work people were great, and I got a half-time admin person appointed to support me in that post, and it didn't make me feel like an idiot. It didn't make me feel like I was incompetent.
That's my job.
Yeah, that's your job, yes. What it made me feel was that employers were recognising I had a lot of skills, but there were some things I wasn't very good at, and that somebody else could do those things for me. Like, I can't file. If I pick up a file, I invariably will drop it and all the paper will go all over the floor. So things like that, that I hope I'm good at listening, but I'm not any good at paperwork. So this is a sort of a new line of thinking that about people who are their own employer because they're self-employed, and actually are they then giving themselves reasonable adjustments in effect? And so taking on board too much. You could take yourself to a tribunal, yeah. Yeah, take yourself to a tribunal. Taking on too much, also not wanting to let people down, not being able to say no. So, Jess, I know you've got experience of self-employment and so on. So any advice there, please?
I've got loads, but I just don't listen to my own advice. Like I said, I'm not perfect. I'm only human. As a self-employed person, again, you are entitled to apply for access to work, and they can pay for part of, I think they pay a percentage of admin support, for example, if you needed an administrator. The just saying no thing as a self-employed person is the hardest thing in the world to do, isn't it? Because you're like, when's the work going to dry up? Is it just going to stop I'm going to just take it all on now. I have found the system that I use is Google Calendar, and I block time out, and I promised myself, and I've to it 80%, protecting my time. So really kind of getting very organized and going, okay, on this day I am doing this job and this job only. Maybe only having having an admin day on a Friday, for example, where you get to catch up with things. Out of office responses, so that even if you're not out of the office, that say, I will respond to your email on these days at these set times. Little things like that means that you are giving the people the information that you are not available at that moment in time, which will then hopefully you will feel less pressured from that, because they're safe. They know that that's okay. It could be, a part of your signature. I know a lot of people that are self-employed that have got out of offices on every day saying, I work, let's say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with clients. I do not respond to emails on this time. You will be, responded to on a Thursday and Friday or something like that. And then if it is something urgent, you can break that if you want to, but it gives you a little bit more leeway. And forward planning, especially financially as well. There are, you can get template spreadsheets for kind of cash flow. There are cash flow apps and things like that as well. Just so that you can kind of go, okay, do I need to take that bit of work on right at this second? If the answer is yes, then you do it. If the answer is no, you push it. And actually, most people, if you are strong within your wording, I don't mean being rude, but if you are kind of going, nope, this piece of work will be done on the whatever of June, is that okay for you? If they come back and say no, you go, okay, that's fine. But at least you're not feeling stressed about it. But I do think that a lot of people are willing to wait, more so than we realise, especially as self-employed people.
Already? Yep. Okay. So one comment over the break, amongst many, but one comment was, again, from somebody else who'd read Steph Jones' book, was that it answered all the questions, and the comment that it was written from the inside rather than from the outside. And I thought that was a very interesting concept. So I suspect, I don't know if there's any copies left of Steph's book, but it's definitely worth a purchase, I think, if you were thinking of therapy or you've undergone therapy in the past. Not that you should have therapy, you may not need therapy, and you may not want therapy. So any further questions? So I don't think I'm going to do this justice. I'll do my best. But part of following on from the discussion about Steph's book has been written almost from the outside, and lots of what people have read is from people who are on the outside looking in rather than from the inside looking out. And that there are two particular terms that would like a bit of feedback from you. One is the whole notion of interoception, but sort of widening that to not having anything to report on almost, which can be seen as quite a deficit model, as opposed to alexithymia, which a fellow lover of the Greek language there, from alexithymia. People who know me know how much I love the Greek language. So word without the words to describe feelings, and how complex this whole notion of feelings, words, describing and so on. So good luck on that one, Jess. That's a really hard question. I'm glad you're answering it. Excellent question.
Okay. Oh, I don't even know where to begin with that one. I love it when somebody gives me a question that completely stumps me. Yes, so alexithymia is not being able to express or interpret your own emotions and feelings, very much so. And interoception is the not picking up on the feelings, the kind of needs of what your body wants. That could be anxiety, it could be needing the toilet, it could be eating. And sorry, what was the question again?
Dream, I know you don't want the person to ask the question, but I can't do it with sufficient justice. So please ask the question. I'm rubbish it.
Yes, I read Steph Jones's book in one sitting. I thought it was brilliant. And she had one paragraph when she talks about the problem is resulting from interoception or alexithymia. Alexithymia. The point about, I noticed this, alexithymia is a Greek word. So I read a lot of Greek literature. The Greeks weren't stupid. They must have known about this stuff, obviously, because they had a word for it. So this is not new. Whereas interoception seems to be very much more of a modern type psychological thing. And it seems to me that interoception is linked to a deficit model of polyvagal theory, where the actual bodily functions actually cannot read this stuff because of the structure of the mind and body. So the real question is this. These two things are quite different. One is alexithymia is a really optimistic way of looking at it, whereas interoception is a really pessimistic way of seeing things. So I'd like to know what your view is. How do you score them? Optimistic or pessimistic?
Jess, before you answer, can I just say a bit? I did a presentation on alexithymia because there was a Greek word for it, but it did get hijacked. It got hijacked by a Greek psychiatrist and another psychiatrist who then, classic from the outside in, that. So in some ways, I've challenged, in the presentation on alexithymia, I've challenged the autistic community around adopting this word because of the way it started, which was right, but the way it got hijacked, and the way it got hijacked mostly around personality disorder. So when you look into a lot of the history of these things, it's a word that I see it here a lot in the autistic community. So I just threw out, I don't know if anyone remembers that presentation that I did, I threw out a bit of a challenge to why are you using this word? So if you would like to find Dream, perhaps we could put a link in with the alexithymia presentation that I did as well. Okay, Jess, I've given you a few more minutes to have a think about answering this really very interesting question.
I am somebody myself who finds it very difficult to express and interpret my emotions in a neurotypical way, which I think is where kind of alexithymia stems from, isn't it? Is that it's not, it's, I actually see alexithymia, you know, the kind of the view of it is deficit based, that you cannot do these things, that you are rubbish at doing this thing. But actually, again, I think we need to step away from that and say, okay, I might not be able to express them in the same way that somebody who is not autistic, but actually I probably express and interpret my emotions in a way that is quite autistic. And I'm not saying that everybody who's autistic has the same kind of differences there that I do, but a lot of people do. The introspection bit for me is that I think that I'm really trying to think of how to ask you not notice. I think with the introspection, it feels much more physical, that it's, it may be that you are not picking up on those signs because you are so engrossed in your interest at that moment, and so everything has gone out of the window and all you want to do is your craft project, or you're reading, or you're researching, or whatever it might be. But I do get where you're coming from with the fact that it's kind of, again, it's deficit based, but then so much of the speech around autism still is. And we need to kind of move away from that as much as possible. I'm just completely rambling now, and I'm very aware of that. But I think my views are that, again, with autism, that not everybody thinks that they have alexithymia or has problems with picking up on those internal signals of their body, and that it is really personal for each person. And I think that we have to kind of respect that. There we go. There's my get out of jail free card.
I think constantly at Axia, and we have lots of meetings about this, about how to present autism in a positive light, but not going right over the top and saying this is a superpower that makes you so much better than everyone else, but also making sure that we're accepting the challenges that autistic people face. And it's a really difficult line to walk, and that's why we constantly talk about that at Axia. We've tried to, with the way we speak about executive functioning, so the term is executive functioning, which you'll know is a Greek word for dis at the front of anything, is meaning difficulty with. So we call it executive functioning. Central coherence, which is that paying attention to detail, but the other side of that is maybe missing the context. That the the term that is out there in the literature is weak central coherence. We have got rid of the weak and talk about central coherence to say there's a strength that comes with that, but there's also some difficulties that come with that. We also, in terms of theory of mind, which is a big debate at the moment, the actual term used is lack of theory of mind, whereas we use the term theory of mind to try and make sense. We do have, and it's interesting when you talk to some of the children, we do have children saying, if I ask them, do you know when you're hungry? And many of the children aren't quite sure that if they know when they're hungry. Now, this could be because they're playing a game and they don't want to stop that, so they're not eating. But I think genuinely there are some children who don't know whether they're hungry or thirsty or tired or angry. But that doesn't mean you can't help those children. We've got someone in the room, I don't want to look at them, but there's someone in the room that could probably answer the interoception better than me and Jess. Okay, the person has nodded, so I'm going to hand over to Ebony, one of our diagnosticians, who's a member of the Royal College of Occupational Therapists.
So this is going to be quite like a simplistic view, and I'm trying to explain scientific concepts in like the easiest way possible to understand. Essentially, in our mind, there's like a bit of a control centre, and all of our senses, they go up to the control centre. Our brain decides if something's important, if it's a little bit interesting, if we don't need to pay attention to it. For some people, if they're hypersensitive, so maybe they're less sensitive in terms of their interoception, when they might always need to go to the toilet. Because as soon as they slightly need to go to the toilet, their brain is telling them this is really, really important. We really, really need to go right now. But then you might get people who the signals going up to their brain, we need the toilet, and the brain saying, this isn't really that important, until it gets to the point where they really, really, really need to go to the toilet, but their brains kind of applied the this is really important label to it right at the very end, which I know for me, I don't know for other people in the room, I don't know I'm hungry until I'm starving, and by that point I'm in a really bad mood, and it's not until someone says to me, you're in a bad mood, are you hungry, that I go, oh okay, yeah, maybe that's it, because my brain has implied that this is important thing. It's not been a gradual, it's been absolutely fine, so all of a sudden I'm absolutely starving. It's a very quick change. Alexithymia and interception, like they're about different things essentially in that way. I guess interoception is quite like a scientific term, and it's a scientific process inside of our body, which can be applied to like temperature and pain and that kind of stuff as well. Does that make sense at all? Have I made sense?
And that's the beauty of working at Axia. So we've got some brilliant minds working at Axia, and Jess and me are brilliant at some things, and Ebony and other people in the room are brilliant at others. So that I'm going to big us up, because one of the beauties about Axia is that we've got so many different people with so many different perspectives coming from different angles, and then put together, that makes for really exciting colleagues. And that's why particularly with the children, when we diagnose, we make sure that other colleagues are part of that process, that it isn't one person doing that it's several people doing that. And if we can predict there might be issues around movement, sensory, then our two occupational therapists are the obvious people to join. So we've all got our strengths and challenges, and I think that's, in terms of trying to link it with the topic, what I would hate Jess to go away is thinking, I didn't answer that question very well. You know, that beating yourself up. Because autistic people, I always say, please don't criticise the autistic individual, because they're doing a very good job of it themselves. And I think that what Jess has spoken about has opened up lots of discussion, collaboration in the room. There's also the strength of the minds that are in this room. And it's a privilege, absolute privilege, to be in this room with all of you. Anyway, I've got emotional now. So some people in the group have just shared some very important personal experiences here around the fact that no one knows what people are coping with, people making assumptions, people not realising how life can be so difficult. And so I think what I'd quite like to do now is bring it back to the beginning, so people go away with your message, Jess. So could you take us back to that need, want and should, to just sort of bring this back, so people go away with some practical ways, because I don't want people going away the way the three of you and other people were joining in, you know, it's pretty profound. So I'd like you to go away with something positive. So Jess, over to you, please.
I just wanted to just very quickly say that nobody else sees the cost of being autistic in a non-autistic world for most of the time. That is something that we push down, and I'm gonna make this positive, all right? So don't worry, just bear with me. It is something that we tend to push down so that we can try to function in a world that is not really set up for the majority of autistic people. As Linda said, sort of bringing it back to the things, focus on the need tos and the want tos. The want tos are as equally as important as the need tos, and sack off the should dos. Throw them in the bin, leave them there, close the door on them, and don't think about them anymore. And as I said, if you need help from people around you, ask them. If you need somebody to help you decide whether or not it's a should do or a want to, and also come up with, Linda said, writing it down as well. If there is no joy in it, don't do it. If you do it, think to yourself, why have I just done this to myself? Write it down, store it somewhere, and then you can come back to it at a later date and go, that thing was not okay for me. Because I don't know about a lot of you, but that's something that I sometimes forget, is what the impact that something has had on me. And I am trying to have conversations with my other half about that, and try to get him to remind me of well, the last time you did that, Jess, what happened? Yeah, no, I was in bed for 3 days afterwards, wasn't I? All right, maybe I won't do that again. So yeah, summing it up, need tos, want tos, sack off the should dos. There we go.
Thanks very much indeed, Jess. And I'd like to thank Jess for the presentation today.